Hello and welcome to this session. This is Professor Farhat. In this session, we're going to look at basic terms and definitions in which we'll use in a cost accounting or a managerial accounting course. The first thing we look at is cost. What is a cost? A cost is incurred every time you sacrifice a resource. So every time a resource is used up, whatever that resource is, you might be using cash, you might be using supplies, you might be using some other resource, for example, paying for labor through cash to achieve a purpose. So simply put, you sacrifice a resource to achieve a business purpose, whatever that purpose is. Now, we need to know what is a cost object. What is a cost object? Is anything that the company is interested in collecting information about. For example, if the company is manufacturing if the company is manufacturing computers, well, the cost object is the computers. So they want to know anything and everything that goes into that cost object. It doesn't have to be computers. You might be collecting cost information about a specific department. Then the department is the cost object. So anything that we have interest in. For example, any product, service, notice, you could also collect information about a specific customer, how much it's costing us to keep up a customer, activity, or an organizational unit to which costs are assigned for some management purpose. So we need to collect information about. So something of interest you want to collect cost about. Okay. For example, if we want to look at a more specific example, for example, at BMW, the cost object could be the product itself, which is the BMW X5 sports activity vehicle. So it could be the vehicle itself as a cost. So you're collecting information about that. Or the cost object could be the service, the dealer support telephone line. That's what you need to compute or collect cost about. Could be a specific project within BMW, like R&D project on DVD system enhancement. It could be a specific customer, Herb Chambers Motor, which is a dealer that purchases a broad range of BMW vehicles. So this is what we are looking at. We're looking at the specific customer as the cost object. We could be looking at an activity, how much it's costing us to set up production machine. It could be a department, and the environmental department or health and safety. All of those could be considered a cost object. So notice it's not only the product, anything it's of interest to us as a company that we need to collect information about. Cost pool. What are cost pool? Cost pool are when costs are assembled in a meaningful and logical group in an organized manner. So basically what you do, you have a lot of cost, and what you do, you try to pool the cost into some meaningful way. And we would look at an example, but this is what cost pool is: assembling the cost into a meaningful way. Okay, what is cost allocation? Cost allocation is the process of collecting the cost. How do you collect this cost? And we'll look at how we collect the cost later on as we progress throughout the course. And those are basically basic. Cost assignment is basically gathering the cost into cost pools, then assigning the cost into a specific object. Okay, so basically what we do, we have a cost, we incur a cost, we take all these costs, we put them in a cost pool. Then from the cost pool, we allocate the cost into the cost object. Let's put down the cost object. So this is what cost assignment is. When you allocate the cost simply into the cost pool, then the cost object. Now, certain costs, they can be easily allocated, which are called direct costs. They can be easily and conveniently and economically, it doesn't cost you a lot of money to trace them to a cost pool or to a cost object. So they're very easy to trace. And we're going to look later on, we're going to look at an example will be direct labor and direct material. Don't worry if you don't know what these terms are. Just know that we have direct cost, and that's direct cost is easily traced to a cost object. And we have indirect cost that cannot be easily traced to a cost or pool object. So we'll try to find some cause and effect. And here what we're looking at is, we're going to see later, it's overhead or MOH, manufacturing overhead. Those costs, again, we'll define later. Just know that there's direct cost and indirect cost, that those costs cannot be easily traced to the product. Therefore, this is where we need to put a lot of effort as cost accountant. Okay, so what we need to do for the indirect cost, we need to allocate it. So cost allocation is a form of cost assignment actually, but it deals with indirect cost to cost pool, then the cost object, through something called the cost driver. So what we'll try to find something that drives the cost of the indirect cost. So what is driving the cost of indirect cost? It could be indirect labor. It could be our electricity. The more electricity we use, the more cost we incur. Therefore, we need to find some cost driver. Okay, and what is a cost driver? Is any factor that has the effect of changing the level of total cost. Again, for example, electricity. We say the more electricity we use, the higher is our consumption of that indirect cost. So again, there's some guessing when we allocate the indirect cost, and that's going to be the hardest for us as accountant, but we'll try our best, and in the real world, we'll try our best to determine what's that cost allocation. Now, if we determine that X is a cost allocation, then a year or two later, we may find out that that's not our proper cost allocation. Maybe Y is our cost allocation. And don't worry, we'll learn about how we can find out what's our cost allocation. Then this is a picture of what we just talked about. We have resource cost, which is the cost. The cost could be a form of electric motors. Well, let's start. Let's start with the cost object. Let's assume our cost object. Let's start from the end. We are manufacturing dishwasher and washing machines. That's what we are manufacturing. So obviously we have to incur costs to manufacture those. So what we could be incurring? We could be incurring electric motors. For the dishwasher, we could also have material handling. We need supervisors to supervise the process. We need packing materials for and we need to do a final inspection. So all of those are the costs. So the first column here is our cost, okay, or resource cost, or simply the money. Then what we do, all the cost, it's gonna be grouped into cost pools. For example, we have two cost pools. We determine we have two cost pools: assembly and packing. For example, in the assembly, we need electric motors before we assemble the dishwasher. So that's basically, in a sense, that's material. Okay, we need material handling for both. We're gonna allocate some to the assembly and some to the packing department. Supervision, it's going to be some to the assembly and some to the packing department. We need somebody to supervise the process. Packing material only, we're going to trace the packing material to the packing department. And the final inspection, we're going to skip the cost pool, and the final inspection can be traced to the dishwasher and can be traced to the machine. So this is basically a picture of our cost, a cost pool. Then from the cost pool, we allocate this money or to the cost object. Now, the other thing is we said we have direct and indirect. So let's take a look at this. The electric motor is considered a direct cost. So this is the resource, this is the cost driver. The cost driver here is direct. We can easily trace, if we put an electric motor in a dishwasher, we can easily trace that. We can easily trace that cost to that dishwasher. Okay, so the cost pool that we put the electric motor in is the assembly department. It can be the cost, the driver is direct, and this is for the dishwasher, and obviously the washing machine also we'll have an electric motor. Packing material, also direct trace. We're gonna assemble that cost into the packing department, and it's direct trace, and we're gonna need to pack the dishwasher and we need to pack the machine. The final inspection, also considered direct trace, because we can easily determine which employee is inspecting the final product for the dishwasher as well as the machine. Now, the supervision cost is considered indirect cost. Why? Because we really don't know how much cost of how much time the supervision took to or spend, or how much resources of that labor time we spent on each cost object. Therefore, we have to find an allocation base. For example, we can use the number of employees in the department. For example, if we have, let's assume we have 10 employees, and keep it simple, let's assume 5 in the assembly and 5 in the packing. Therefore, we're gonna, whatever the supervision cost is, we allocate this 50-50. Let's assume we have 10 employees in total, 8 for the assembly and 2 for the packing. We're going to allocate 80% to the supervision and 20% to the packing. So basically, we find an allocation base, and we happen to choose here the number of employees, because if the supervisor is spending more time supervising employees, it means the cost is higher in that specific department. The allocation base could be the direct labor hour. The more direct labor hour, based on the number of employees, the more we allocate. Material handling, the allocation base could be the weight of the material. The more material we use, obviously, the more cost we're going to incur. And the allocation base is the number of parts in the product. So how many parts do we have in the product that needs material? Okay, so this is basically a picture of basic terms and concepts that you will see in a cost accounting course or managerial accounting course. Now, if you're studying for your CPA or CMA, and this is basic material, you have to know. And make sure to read the book, make sure to work your homework, make sure to complete the quiz, and if you have any questions, email me or see me in class.